Join us now then on this trip through history to see what's happened to the 38th over those 25 years. We met the barge in the centre of Bristol on Friday evening and slept on the barge. It had spaces for 12 beds, and then Saturday morning we set sail from the centre of Bristol towards Bath. On the journey, when it was appropriate, but certainly not in the centre of Bristol, everybody had an opportunity to guide it under direction from the owner who was there to give instructions. And at each lock, and there were plenty on the way to Bath, we had the opportunity to be involved in opening gates and valves and so on to move the water up and down so we could climb or rise as was appropriate. In fact, to go into Bath, basically you're rising all the time because the river is coming down towards Bristol. There was quite adequate space there for cooking and eating, having a meal together, so we were able to do that as we would normally on camp. I think here we're going sort of fairly near to what's called Hanham Locks. Here's the main London line running alongside it, and finally as we get towards the Keynsham area would be the first lock that we would have to open, go into, and then close it, and then we have to open the sluice gate, the other end, fill it up until we match the height the other side of it, and then proceed on. I said everybody had a go. Here's David Day.
Mighty handsome fellow.
And Zarkela. This would be probably between Keynsham and Salford area, but there's David. I think there's me having a steer at the moment, and Keith sat on the side there. We were blessed with fairly decent weather. Debbie. So that we were able to sit out up on the top, because the thing only does about 4 knots. So even without the locks it's a 3-hour journey, but with the locks it takes most of the day to get from Bristol to Bath. It's difficult to see from the surrounds exactly where we were, but it took quite a lot of effort to move these gates. They're very solid wood. And eventually we arrived in Bath, not far from Bath Abbey, and we moored at the side, but that's obviously not where we moored, because we're still going through another sluice gate. As you get towards Bath there's quite a few, until you actually get into the sort of confines of the city, and then it's sort of plain sailing. But here we are with another lock. Each time going through the lock can take best part of an hour, because as you can see here we've got to actually fill up between the 2 gates from the and we're climbing all the time, so each time we've got to let water in from the direction that we're going in and then carry on. And eventually here we are in the city of Bath. and we moored at the side. There we are, all lined up. And then we had the evening in Bath before we returned to sleep on the boat, on the barge I should say, Saturday night. This is the eating area, Bristol narrowboats. And then we leave Bath. I think this is somewhere around about Salford again, for the return journey, which took most of Sunday. But I don't think we had any bad weather at all. It was pretty decent, so that everybody could sit up on the top. We had odd stops for refreshments. I think it was Keith who came up with the idea, because he's a mastermind of information, and he came up with the idea of booking this barge for the weekend, so that we could have an experience of travelling on the locks and on canals and operating the locks, and that was it. And here we are getting ready for 1980 camp, loading the vehicle transporting all our equipment in the car park at Wells Road. And we're this time off to the south coast to visit the campsite near Babbacombe, the Scout district campsite for the Torquay area. And this is the one that was the site for the Jamboree, the Devon Jamboree, back in the early 70s. But this time we were having our own summer camp there, rather than being part of a jamboree. We had some pretty good weather there, and an opportunity to visit some of the local things of interest. There was a bay close by, about half a mile away, for swimming. And we had some interesting walks along the coast as well. So here we are, all set up. Each year we ask the Scouts to design a t-shirt, and this one had a train on it, because we were going at one point on the steam train that goes along the coast. But here's the local bay, Pebble Beach, just down a lane from the campsite, and this we tried out, I think, on the first day after we got there. And then we're back to cooking a meal, and no camp was complete without chicken supreme. The supreme was fine because it came out of a packet, but the rice had to be got right, otherwise it was over stodgy or not properly cooked. But this looks fine. It was usually one of the first made meals at camp over many years, and leaders often sat in on patrol meals because it kept standards up. And then we had this kite flying, which went fine until I think it ended up in a tree eventually, and we had to borrow a ladder to recover it. This is another meal. It looks like a chop there, a lamb chop. Yeah, well, the thing has, the kite has ended up in the top of a tree, quite a long way up, and we've got to somehow recover it with a very, very long ladder. Chris Ackland, one of the leaders, always volunteered to climb up the tree. And eventually shaking a few branches and so forth, and it is recovered. Here we have Simon Webb, practicing his knots and teaching the younger ones. In Fairburn there. We've got a petrol stove here by the look of it. A series of stoves, petrol stove and a primus. And an exercise with a compass. I think that was when we did some mini orienteering, where they went round a course having been given directions with a compass bearing and distance to try and find the next point. Here we have an investiture. We had Peter Klein with us there at camp, plus some of Venture Scouts, and we hired a minibus on occasions. One of our many hikes. We were certainly blessed with really fine weather. And here we are up on top of Dartmoor. During which we did some abseiling from a fairly high rock. Leaving the trig point in the background, continuing on. It's quite, even in the summer, can be you can get quite bad weather in these sort of regions, but we did fairly well for weather on this occasion. And so we stopped for lunch before selecting the appropriate place for some rope work. Looks like it's clouding up again. The weather can change so rapidly in this sort of region, and so even though it's summer, you certainly got to be prepared for dealing with adverse weather conditions. Someone being threatened with being dropped into a few inches of water here. But whether it actually happened, I'm not sure. Well, they're certainly getting in pretty close. The Dartmoor pony. It's certainly getting darker again. Nothing like a stream for occupying scouts. And then here a hike in somewhat more gentle terrains. but sooner or later we're up by the rocks that we're going to use for some abseiling. Typical Dartmoor outcrops of granite. It's always a question of finding a secure anchor point so that you can belay someone down the rocks, but in this case it looks like just a slight climb and leaping off. Finally off down the road to finishing our hike. They're not always that friendly. Nothing like a break for an ice cream. Here's our minibus climbing over the moorland. Wrestling back at camp, and then some axe experience. Quite a nice V wedge in this one, but it does take a long time to get even a relatively small tree down with an axe, especially if you're almost the size of the axe. I think what happened here was that the campsite actually wanted a tree felled, so they gave us the opportunity to be involved in it. And down it comes. And then we're pruning it. An assault course. Looks like a free-for-all at the moment, but these things usually turn into a competition of some sort. An aerial ropeway through the trees. And then an aerial runway to finish. Supposed to get off when it stops. The smaller ones have to be helped down. Looks like somebody's going to come off there in a minute. Yes, they do. And then Dead Man's Crawl. Looks relatively easy as long as you keep one leg down, but if you bring them both up, you do an about turn and go down. Well, eventually we did get round to some abseiling up at on the Dartmoor tops there, where you get quite substantial rock outcrops And here's Simon going down. Starting off is always the worst bit, going over the edge to start with. Once you get going, that's fine, but sometimes scouts find it very difficult to get over that first bit and want to hang on to the rope rather than leaning back and doing what you should do when you're abseiling. Some people can get down in seconds, and others take a very long time. It's very time consuming, this, because it takes some time to get everybody fixed up with their ropes, and then a safety line on as well, so they can be belayed down. And afterwards, a train trip. There's a steam engine that runs along the south coast from Torquay to Dartmouth, and hence the train on the t-shirt design for this year. Here we're going past a little bay near Paynton. Trouble is, everybody wants to put their eyes out of the window, and when it's checking out smoke, you soon get bits of smut in your eyes. And here we are back at camp again for an inspection. A thorough inspection here by the group scout leader. All sorts of things being explained. And a careful look inside the tent to make sure everything's clean and tidy. Another trip up the tree. Not quite sure what this is for, whether we had another kite stuck, but oh yes, it's Australia time. They're supposed to go out and come back, but I don't think that happens very often unless you really know what you're doing. And then an assault course. You're not supposed to drop your dinner on the ground, of course. Covered in grass and all sorts of sticky things that make it stay there. Down to the seaside for relaxation, and between a couple of miles outside of Paynton is a course. It's been there for many years. In fact, it's still there, and they all had to go on the go-karts. Some were more cautious, others head round. Some were small, so that they needed an adult to go with them, a few of them, but it was something that they all really enjoyed. And then a Sunday at camp, time for a meeting, a quiet time, but Sunday was usually also the time that we ended up with water fights. And here's Peter Klein making sure everybody gets drowned. You need a really hot sunny day for this, and we certainly had one on this occasion. No one spared. I think there's our Kayla getting drowned by Peter. And then we all get presentable and off on a hike. In this case it was along the coast path towards Torquay itself. It's a beautiful part of the world, and some really great coast paths, and they all inevitably lead to one beach or another. So before long we were having a break and opportunity to go in the sea on this hot sunny day. I think this is probably Babbacombe, which is about halfway between the site and Torquay itself. Here's the model village at Babbacombe. Been there for many years, and of great interest to everybody from children to adults. It's quite a large site, and there's all sorts of model trains and model villages and bridges and all sorts of things to go and see. And that brings us to the end of 1980 Scout Summer Camp.